friends, I'm Carrie Jo, and this is Holy Chuckles Podcast, a space where all meets honesty and where God's gentle humor shows up in the people he chooses. So pull up a seat, take a breath, and let's look together for the sacred in the everyday and the quiet laughter of a God who delights in working through our imperfect stories. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Holy Chuckles Podcast. I want to move on with my goodbye tour, my spiritual journey. The last episode, I left it as I was leaving my apartment for this journey. My first stop was going to be Grapevine, Texas. This was the first real home that I shared with my ex-wife after we got married. This would be beginnings, love, and growth. We looked at this apartment for forever. Actually, we went to this apartment because it was a place that my ex-wife really wanted to live. For me, I didn't really care where we lived because I work from home. As long as we were in the DFW area, I was happy with that. I go over to this apartment complex because this is going to be my first stop on this journey. I drive by our old apartment, drive by the pool we used to hang out in a lot. I decided I wanted to do my prayer, my ritual, my affirmations at the back of the apartment complex where they had this nice area where it was a reserve. There was a pond. I made my way to that back area. On my way, I saw a homeless man. This is not a busy area. Again, we were by a reserve. There weren't a lot of homeless people there because there wasn't really a place for them to ask for money or be where there was shelter so they could be covered. I think across the street is a car wash and a gas station, and then everything else is pretty much kind of spread out. It was odd because our whole time that we were there, I don't know, I think it was 3 years, 4 years. I don't think I ever saw any homeless in that apartment complex in that area. Coyotes, eagles, snakes, because again, we were by a reserve. So all those animals that I saw, but homeless people, no, not really, if ever. He was walking away from where I was going, and he was carrying a big red bag thrown over his shoulder. This is going to sound odd, but it looked like kind of like the bag Santa Claus carries. We made eye contact, and I happened that morning to put cash in my pocket. I don't really carry cash, but I happened to have cash laying on my counter and thought, you know what? I'll go ahead and take this with me today. When I saw him and we made eye contact, I was like, I should stop and give him that money. But something told me to keep going, that today was my day. It was for me, and it wasn't a day to help anyone else, to assist anyone else, to solve anyone else's problems. It was a day for me to take care of me. This was my journey and something that I needed to do. So I did my goodbye at the water and did my prayer, my ritual, which was like writing out 3 memories on a piece of paper and then tearing them up. After I did that, I left the apartment. Just like I did in my episode number 9, I'm going to tell you what happened and then give you the symbolic of what it meant, what I know it meant for me. The symbolic of seeing the homeless gentleman was seeing old wounds and recognizing them, making eye contact with them. I felt the familiar pull to shift energy outward. Just like I said, I wanted to help him instead of doing what I needed to do for me. I felt that familiar pull to shift my energy outward instead of take care of myself. But this time, was a change for me. This time I honored my inner peace and I didn't abandon myself. My journey started with a symbolic quote unquote test, if you will. Are you really ready? Or will you give your energy back to old patterns? Or will you give it to your own healing? And this time I made the decision. I knew within myself, I was giving it to my own healing, even though part of me was like, let me help this person. But the other part of me was like, no, today we take care of us. I'm going to go ahead and say test passed. My way to my next stop, the song I Am Light by India Arie played. I had never heard this song, but I did pick it to go into my rotation. If you have never heard this song before and you are going through something, you are trying to find who you are becoming, your spiritual journey, your relationship with God, go listen to this song. I'm going to read some of the lyrics because they are so powerful and they're so enlightening. It starts out, I am light. I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in my head. I am not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light. I am not the mistakes that I have made or any of the things that caused me pain. I am not the pieces of the dream I left behind. I am light. I am not the color of my eyes. I am not the skin on the outside. I am not my age. I am not my race. My soul inside is all light. I am light. I am divinely defined. I am the God on the inside. I am a star, a piece of it all. I am light. Wow, wow, wow. That song showed up the moment I drove off from that chapter. Not when I arrived, not in the middle of it. I picked anywhere from 3 to 4 songs for each stop. And that song started playing when I drove off from that Grapevine apartment to go to my next stop. That song to me was saying, I don't have to carry that chapter anymore. Not the pain, not the confusion, not the version of myself I was in it, not the emotional patterns, not the heaviness, not the shadows of that relationship. Instead, I am stepping into clarity, emotional independence, self-worth, peace, stronger boundaries, lightness, a new identity, a more God-centered path. This moment marked the shift from I was defined by what happened to me to I am defined by who I am becoming. My next stop was Keller, Texas. This was an emotional goodbye to false family. I was reclaiming emotional energy instead of a bond built on illusion. I was healing the wound of chosen family betrayal. I was letting go of someone I labeled as family who never held that role. I was young when I met this person, and it wasn't a choice that I had, but later in life, the choice for the relationship was mine. I think those of us that lose a parent early, especially our nurturer, we look for people. And I also think people who need things for themselves also look for things in people that meet those needs. Each of us were meeting needs that we had in those moments. In that time, we called each other family, but unfortunately, that's probably not an accurate description of what our relationship was. It was a relationship of needs meeting needs. And that's really it. And at some point, you grow out of those needs. When you grow out of those needs, there's not really any reason to have that relationship. That relationship can't even withstand the test of time. What do people say? People come into your lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And for this one, it definitely was a reason and a season, but it was never meant to be a lifelong, just because where each of us were, what each of us needed wasn't going to withstand our emotional growth. This was me separating from false identity to return to my true one. I was ending cycles of role playing. I was no longer performing to earn love. Ending emotional codependence. Returning loyalty to myself instead of having loyalty to someone that wasn't loyal to me, but what I could provide. I was reclaiming my heart territory. This was a place I redefined who I belonged to, and who I belonged to was me. My next stop in this journey was Jacksboro, Texas. Called this destination Grief, Relief, Ancestral Peace. This is where my mom is buried. And on my way to Jacksboro, I saw sign after sign after sign. The first sign that the first sign that I had was I didn't go the same way that I normally would go. I didn't go the way that I knew to go. Instead, I put the address in Waze and I let Waze guide me, even though it wasn't a place or a route I was familiar with. For me, this symbolized breaking generational cycles, not walking the same path. Using Waze and going the way that Waze sent me instead of the way that I knew was allowing guidance instead of habit, letting God lead. I have said this on many occasions. Waze tells us where to go if there's accidents along the way, if there's a slowdown, if another route is faster. And even if we know where we're going, we all still use Waze or maps or some kind of direction assistance. And if you think about it in your spiritual life, God is your Waze. God is your maps. When we listen to God, God will lead us in the ways that we need to go. And God will take us around those obstacles that could keep us stuck for years. God will move mountains to make a way for us. So for me, this was just a tap, tap, tap. You're doing the right thing because you're letting God lead. And God's going to move everything out of your way and make your path available for you. My next sign was my childhood friend that I had lunch with the day before. Rebecca texted me, "Be well on your journey today, beloved one." Man, this made my heart swell up. Let me tell you something. If you don't have a Rebecca in your life, you need to get one. You need to find one. And the only way that I can describe a Rebecca in your life is the books. I think that they made it into a series on Netflix, but it's Anne of Green Gables. Rebecca is my Diana. when I am, wah, she just brings me down. She brings me into calmness, into certainty, into love. And we're so opposite, but we work so well together. I am so appreciative that my friend Rebecca walked into our 8th grade class. I don't even know which one it was, with her Big Sally Jesse Raphael glasses and her MC Hammer pants. And she decided that she was not going to let this boisterous, outspoken, sit by me, pick me person scare her away. Instead, we became such fast friends. Even to this day, I am just so appreciative and so grateful for this friendship and for the type of friendship she provides, that she would send me a text on the day of my spiritual journey saying, "Be well on your journey today, beloved one." Because I knew that message came through her from God. This was a blessing, a sending, a witness. God saying, "You're not doing this alone." And he used someone that I love so much, that I respect so much, that I adore so much. He used this person to send me this message. God is beautiful. Man, we have such a loving God. We have such a caring God that even when God sends you on your path to do something that is very difficult, that is very hard, he makes sure to stay with you all the way. Even through a text from your childhood friend. My next sign or breadcrumb from God was a billboard that said, "God loves you." Very matter of fact. This was reassurance that I was held, not abandoned. Love remains even when people don't. God was giving me an exact message a grieving child would need. My whole drive going to my mother's burial site was just filled with signs that God was with me, that God loved me, and God was going to be right by my side the whole entire time. The next sign, or it was really a business that I saw, was called Noah's Ark Storage. Noah in the Bible goes along with survival. Ark means protection, and storage, what we keep. What I kept, emotional survival, what I carried since childhood, what I protected inside myself, what I am now releasing, what God was telling me, you don't need to store the pain anymore. The flood is over. I was going to release all this trauma that I held from the sadness, the abandonment, the trauma of my mom passing away when I was a young girl. My next sign was a crane holding a cross. I can't make this up. I cannot make this up. I even looked up to the sky and was like, stop playing with me. Our God is a funny God. Literally a crane holding a cross. A cross being lifted equals burdens being raised from the earth. Grief being lifted, weight being removed, my pain being taken to a higher place. This was emotional resurrection. My next sign was Grace Church billboard. Grace equals unearned love. Forgiveness of my own mistakes, my release from guilt, peace offered freely. New beginnings after grief. The next sign I saw, life is better on the trail. This one especially is symbolic because my goodbye tour is literally a trail. What I took away from this is life improves when you keep going. Healing in motion, walking the right path. I do want to say there were a lot of signs on the way to this site, probably more than I could comprehend. There were a lot of billboards, a lot of businesses, a lot of stuff on the way. But for some reason, these are the ones that caught my eye, and they were the ones that I exactly needed on my journey as I'm going to release this pain and grief that I carried for so long because my mom passed away, and she was my heart. She was my first love. And these signs just gave me peace and comfort along the way. As I got into Jacksboro, I went to my grandparents' house where I would go during the summertime and had some great just memories flood through my mind. The first one was the smell of the entranceway into my grandparents' home. My grandfather, who was a minister, he fixed lawnmowers at his house on the side. And when you walk through, there were tools everywhere. You usually could see like a lawnmower he was working on, and it smelled like oil and gas and dirt. When you walk through that area to the front door, or to the door we went in, you took that smell with you as you walked in the door. And when you came in the door, because my grandmother was such an awesome baker and an amazing cook, you went from smelling gas, oil, and dirt to smelling cinnamon rolls, bread, and love. For me, when that memory came through, it reminded me of going from my masculine, my mind was leading, to my life now where my feminine is leading, that love and nurturing and living from the soul. It was such a great metaphor for what I'm going through right now. And it just brought back such good memories. Then I went to another memory there where we would sit on the front porch. You could hear the snow cone man, the snow cone truck. And I know for me, always a fat kid, I would wonder, are we going to get a snow cone today? My grandfather, you would hear him jangle the quarters or the coins in his pocket. You knew each of you were getting a quarter and y'all were going to get to pick your snow cone. Then we would sit out there on that porch and just enjoy our snow cone and our time with our grandparents. So God was so loving and gracious because he reminded me to go down that road and take a right instead of heading just on my journey. And I would have taken a left to go to the burial site, but God reminded me to take a right and go enjoy those good memories when I was a kid, to remember that child within me. And not all of it was bad growing up. Not all of it was trauma growing up, but God allowed me to go and experience and remember those memories of my childhood with my grandparents, and those great memories that really I had put to the side. And it was fantastic to experience that love and that happiness and that joy before releasing this trauma of abandonment. So I left my grandparents' house, and at each stop that I went, I would also journal, because I've been learning in my life, part of releasing is writing down the feelings that I had before, the feelings that I'm having right now, and what it means to release and let go. When I do this, it's making space for the things that God's bringing in my life, because I'm releasing those old memories, that old trauma, these old things that don't coincide with my life anymore. I journaled for a little bit, and then I was on my way to the burial site where my mom was laid to rest. I did put it into GPS just in case I had forgotten, but GPS wanted me to take a different road, and I then turned the GPS off because I remembered which way to go and how to get there. And to me, that meant I know the way, I carry the memory, I walk my own path. I am not alone. On this way, because I didn't follow GPS, I decided to go by memory. I saw one lone eagle flying, and it wasn't just flying in the air. It was literally above me, going the same way I was going. I kept my eye on the eagle to see where it was going, and it was kind of going in the same vicinity that I was going. If you don't know, an eagle symbolizes spirit, freedom, watchfulness, higher perspective. It symbolized my mother's presence, my soul rising. Eagles don't appear casually. They appear in moments of transition, in moments of blessing. This to me was a visitation. It was a visitation saying from my mom, I am with you, and it's okay to let me go. On this journey, I brought along the ashes of my cat that had passed away, Manilow, and my cat Bear. I love these two little babies. I decided I was going to release my cat's ashes at my mother's gravesite. I just felt that it was symbolic of what I was doing in my life and really releasing them to my mom. My cats were not just my pets, they were my companions, my protectors, my supervisors, my comforters. They were there during a season when my mom wasn't. I felt this symbolized me uniting my heartline. I return the beings who love me unconditionally to the woman who also loved me unconditionally. I stayed at the gravesite for a little bit, talked to my mom a little bit, released the things that I needed to release, and then headed back to my car. At every site, just like I said before, I would play a song. I got back in my vehicle, and the song that I was supposed to play, I wasn't really vibing with it. I wanted to pick out a different song. Wasn't sure what song I was going to pick out. I picked up my phone, went to Spotify, and a song was already up. It was called I'd Miss the Birds. Now, I'd never heard this song, didn't even know this artist, but I went ahead and let the song play because, again, I'm all about signs, all about breadcrumbs. I went ahead and let the song play, and man, did I just have a downpour of emotions. I cried and released. This song was the song that I needed to let that last memory, that last thing I was holding on of my mom, it just all left. When I think about birds, I think about souls, freedom, loved ones carried upwards, the things that leave and return, the messenger between worlds. What that was saying to me was, even what you release stays with you in memory. This song was a grief song, a memory song, a soft landing for my heart. And I appreciated that song being placed in my path because it allowed me to grieve the rest of the way when I really, as a 15, 16-year-old child, didn't even have that chance to grieve, didn't even know how to grieve. This was my releasing of that grief that I had pushed so far down, and I was finally able to let it go. As I'm driving back into town to go to my next stop, I was coming up on this little hill, and to the right was an SUV with a handicap plate, and it was like parked kind of like on the hill with the hazards on. And I thought to myself, wow, that's pretty dangerous. And honestly, I was in the right-hand lane, and I was a little bit irritated because of how it was parked. Had I not moved to the left-hand lane for whatever reason, I may have actually hit this vehicle, but I didn't. And as I passed the vehicle, there was this old brown and white dog sitting literally on its butt, on its hind legs. It was a little overweight dog. It was just sitting there. And this kind person that I at first was irritated at, this kind human parked its car or its SUV in front of this dog so no one would hit this dog coming over that little hill. That is a special person. I don't know of too many people that would sit there for the amount of time that it seemed, because that dog didn't look like it was going anywhere anytime soon. There was nobody outside of their car. There was no one moving to get out of the car. Even when I looked in my rear view mirror, it wasn't like that person was getting out of the car to shoo the dog on. It was like it was literally just going to sit there for however long the dog needed. And it was going to be there to protect the dog. That is a quality human. After I got a little bit down the road, I realized that was a spiritual revelation. That old dog represented the child in me, the wounded version of me, the lost version of me, the part of me that survived danger, the part of me that needed protection. The SUV blocking the road, protecting the dog, that represented my angels. I will say this. When I say angel, I have to go back, because when I was at my mom's gravesite, I, one, haven't been there in a while. Two, when I picked out my mom's headstone, I was 20, 21 and still grieving. And I don't even remember putting these words on the headstone. I even stood at the gravesite and went, oh, wow, that's so true. But on her headstone, it reads, our guardian angel in heaven. And so when I go back to this SUV protecting this dog, it symbolized partly my mom always being with me, always protecting me. It symbolized grace, protection I didn't even know I had. There were times in my life I shouldn't have made it, but I did. That SUV symbolized unseen shields that kept me alive throughout my journey up until now. I was that dog. I had been protected my whole life. It was God saying, you are never alone. I stand between you and what could have harmed you. You have always been protected. And I believe that, knowing my past, knowing the things that I have been through, I believe that. I left Jacksboro that day knowing I was moving into a chapter of protection, clarity, and healing. My heart was starting to recognize safety again. My nervous system was shifting from fear to trust, numbness to awareness, survival to awakening, abandonment to connection, chaos to clarity. The cluster of moments, the breadcrumbs, the signs, they were about my inner world opening up. They were about my intuition coming alive. Leaving Jacksboro, I was headed to my hometown of Granbury. I was going there to release childhood trauma, relive some memories, do what I needed to do for that part of my spiritual journey. And after the I'd Missed the Bird song came on, I just let that playlist, wherever it came from, kept playing. The following songs, someone that I used to be, for me, that was telling me I was shedding my old identity. The next song that came on was Be Yourself. This song was a permission slip. You can now be who you are. On my way to Granbury, I again took a route I normally wouldn't take. GPS was in charge, And the route that I would have normally took was going to take a little bit longer. So I followed GPS. What this symbolized to me is not walking the same path I did as a child, walking the healed version now, not that hurt trauma version. As I was going through this town, and I'm pretty sure it was Mineral Wells. I was passing this old cinema and it read on the outside, "Today marks the start of a new chapter that will never get old." What? What? If you think of a cinema, it's a place where stories are told and retold. Even mine. My story being rewritten. New identity is beginning. Breaking narrative bondage. Leaving the old film reel behind. This sign was God telling me, your new chapter begins today, and it won't repeat your past. I was able to get some pictures of these synchronicities, these signs, these breadcrumbs. You can go to my website, holychuckles.com, and see the pictures there. Again, I was on my way to Granbury, going a route I was unfamiliar with. I'd probably been that way as a child, but not as an adult. For each stop, I would journal, do a ritual, do a prayer, do an affirmation. And for my stop in Granbury, that was my childhood home, something that I needed was a stone or a flower, just as a sign to leave at that particular place. When I was leaving my apartment the morning I started this, I didn't have a stone, I didn't have a flower, and I said to myself, don't worry about it, God will provide. So I'm driving to my childhood home and I start to remember, oh crap, I need a stone or a flower. And I thought to myself, you know what? Somewhere along the way, there will be a flower, there will be something, and I'll know when to pick it up. So turned up my music and I kept moving. I was at a stoplight, received a text. It said, a package is ready for pickup. At the same time I received that text, I was passing a construction site on my left that had a plethora of stones. I turned my vehicle around, parked, got out, picked up a nice size little stone, got back in my vehicle, and said, God, thank you so much for providing. I knew you would. And at that moment, I realized, and I've been saying, I've been living in my blessing. But at that moment, I realized, because I left my home and I said, God will provide what I needed. And then I received that text to pick up a package. And right then was a construction site with stones. And I was able to pick up what I needed for my next stop. I knew I was living in my blessing. I wasn't just saying it. I wasn't just believing it. I wasn't just having faith in it. I was actually living in it. That was God saying, the healing I needed was provided. The stone was provision. Faith became substance. My healing is not something I am forcing. It is something God is giving to me. That is my blessing. God was giving me my blessing of healing, and I was already living in it. I arrived in Granbury, Texas. This is releasing childhood, releasing trauma, and releasing abandonment. I drove up to my childhood home on Kenson Street, and man, I had so many great memories there. So many great memories. The neighborhood kids, one of them one time, she referred to the neighborhood kids as the Kenson clan. And let me tell you, she was spot on with that. What a bunch of great humans, great individuals, and what a time to be alive. When you could spend most of your days outside, your parents not even caring where you are. Half the time, my parents did not know where we were, who we were with. It was the best time of my life. Riding down the street with a playing card stuck in the wheel of your bicycle so it sounded like a motorcycle. Best time ever. Playing in the yard with yard darts. Nobody should have been playing with yard darts. That was a weapon, and we threw them straight up in the air and waited for them to come down to see if they would hit us. We used them as weapons on ourselves. And I am so surprised that no one on Kenson Street is walking around without an eye. The neighbors sharing. You would just be in the yard and neighborhood mom would come out with popsicles or fruit or chips. It wasn't just for her kids. She would make sure to feed all the neighborhood kids. I sat in my vehicle and lived out some of these memories, did my release ceremony and left my rock there, and really said goodbye to my childhood home and those memories and that part of my life. As I was driving down the road, there was a small little yard sign that said, "God's got more." This sign showed up before I faced memories of abandonment, reminding me my story didn't end in trauma. My childhood wasn't the final chapter. God has more life, more healing, more identity for me. My trauma will not define my future. With that sign, it was God saying, there's more for you, more love, more life, more joy. As I was going to my next stop, I was able to relive a lot of great memories. I passed by my old schools, the Decker Gym, where I played little dribblers basketball. I passed my preschool. I passed the city park where the softball fields were, where I spent a lot of my time for many, many years. I passed by the old skating rink, the drive-in movie theater that still is operating today. I passed by my high school. Those, for me, were a lot of great memories. And before I hit this space of memories that weren't fantastic, I was able to raise my vibration, raise my spirits remembering places that brought me joy and love, places that I really loved to be at. My next stop was the townhome that my dad and I shared after my mom passed away. It was the place where my dad left me by myself when he chose to go work out of state. It was a place where a man left a grieving child to figure it out on their own. And not even knowing how to grieve, what was grieving. I really hadn't lost a lot of people in my life. I had lost my grandmother. The age that I lost her, it made it seem that probably she was older than what she was, but for a child, it was normal that older people pass away. So this was my real first experience in grief. And it was a very difficult experience because it was my mother. It was my nurturer. It was the one person in my whole life that I adored, that I looked at with stars in my eyes. She was my everything. She was the most beautiful person I had ever had in my life. Being left to grieve that magnificent presence for me was very difficult. And it was a traumatic experience for me. And not even knowing how to grieve or that I was even grieving, I just knew I had to push forward and do what I needed to do to survive. So revisiting that place was very cathartic for me. And I released a lot of emotion. As I was leaving, there was a town home next to the one that my dad and I had, and they had a sign outside of the door. It read, "In this home, we kneel at the cross." The sign for me wasn't about religion. It was about meaning. God had placed a sign of surrender, healing, and being held right next to the place where I felt abandoned. God was saying to me, even when you felt alone, I was protecting you. Grace surrounded your childhood pain, not spiritually abandoned, even when physically abandoned. I was not forsaken. I was protected and I was seen. I didn't know it. I didn't understand it. But as I'm releasing this trauma and as I was there at the place where I had been abandoned, I knew it then. I was always protected. I was always seen. God was always with me. I left the townhome for my next stop. The route that I was going required me to make a U-turn at a light. So I had a few minutes at a red light, and to the right of that light was a church called Passing Place. That church had a sign that read, "How's your world? Thankfully, God has a plan to make it better." After going through that emotional release and then seeing this sign, all I could do was shake my head. Passing place means passing through. Pain is not permanent. Childhood trauma was not your fault. I was never meant to stay in that emotional state. I am moving beyond it for good. The sign for me meant your world is being healed. And I claimed that. I believe that. I am living in that blessing. My next stop was the church where I was sexually abused as a child. This is probably one of the places with my deepest wound. I say that because I loved going to church. It was a place that I saw my mom shine. I saw her in her glory. I saw the light shine around her and wanted to be just like her. It was a place that I enjoyed worshiping. I enjoyed going until I didn't. I honored the ritual that I needed to do at that site, the prayer that I needed to pray at that site, the affirmations that I needed to do at that site. I didn't avoid the site. I honored it and faced the trauma. When I was leaving, there was a small sign that read, "Happy trails." This was God saying, go in peace. Your journey from this pain is finished. Granbury was not just a release of childhood. It was redemption of childhood, rewriting my story, protection of my innocence, closure to my pain, honoring of the love I did receive, the end of the path of trauma, the beginning of my adult self's freedom. I left Granbury not as a child that was hurt, but as the adult who was healing. Thanks for joining me for Holy Chuckles Podcast, where we remember that God's calling doesn't always make sense, but it's always full of grace. If today's story reminded you that you too are seen, chosen, and loved right where you are, then that's the light shining. So until next time, keep your heart open, your laughter genuine, and your light shining.